श्री अरविंद भक्ति प्रणाम। श्री अरविंद भक्ति प्रणाम। अति मानस के ज्योतित सरसिज दिव्य जगत जीवन के वर द्विज। चिदानंद के स्वर्णिम मनसिज। चिदानंद के स्वर्णिम मनसिज ज्योति धाम सज्ञान प्रणाम। ज्योति धाम सज्ञान प्रणाम। श्री अरविंद भक्ति प्रणाम। श्री अरविंद भक्ति प्रणाम। दिव्य तुम्हारा परम तपोबल अमृत ज्योति से भर दे भूतल। दिव्य तुम्हारा परम तपोबल अमृत ज्योति से भर दे भूतल। सफल मनोरथ सृष्टि हो सकल। सफल मनोरथ सृष्टि हो सकल। श्री ललाम निष्काम प्रणाम। श्री ललाम निष्काम प्रणाम। श्री अरविंद भक्ति प्रणाम। श्री अरविंद भक्ति प्रणाम। विश्वात्मा के नव विकास तुम परम चेतना के प्रकाश तुम। विश्वात्मा के नव विकास तुम परम चेतना के प्रकाश तुम। ज्ञान भक्ति के श्री के विलास तुम। ज्ञान भक्ति श्री के विलास तुम। पूर्ण प्रकाम सकर्म प्रणाम। पूर्ण प्रकाम सकर्म प्रणाम। श्री अरविंद भक्ति प्रणाम। श्री अरविंद भक्ति प्रणाम। अति मानस के ज्योतित सरसिज दिव्य जगत जीवन के वर द्विज। चिदानंद के स्वर्णिम मनसिज। चिदानंद के स्वर्णिम मनसिज ज्योति धाम सज्ञान प्रणाम। ज्योति धाम सज्ञान प्रणाम। श्री अरविंद भक्ति प्रणाम। श्री अरविंद भक्ति प्रणाम। श्री अरविंद भक्ति प्रणाम।
Namaste to all of you, brothers and sisters, boys and girls. Let me join the singer Mithu Pal in paying to the master, and that implies the mother because they were the two who were one. Let me join the singer in paying a humble prostration to them in a spirit of devotion and surrender. We are nearing the end of the course, as you know, and today's session was reserved for questions which you may have and which we'll try to answer. But since it takes time to warm up with the questions a bit, I'll set the ball rolling with a few questions. The love and blessings of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to all of you from Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch. The YES program is a part of the 150th birth anniversary celebrations of Sri Aurobindo and the 75th anniversary of India's independence. This is just the end of the beginning, the end of the first module in the series of YES courses, and what we'll do in this session is to go through a few quick questions which I'm sure all of you can answer on your own by now. The first question is, yoga is a path for ascetics, for eccentrics, for the sick, or is it open to all? The first three are a few categories which sometimes we associate with yoga. The ascetics who have renounced life, gone away to the Himalayas or to a cave in pursuit of something esoteric, which we may call the divine, and we feel that it is only for the select few that yoga has been designed. That might have been so once upon a time, that has been so in some periods in history, but we can't say that for yoga in its true sense and as a whole. Yoga, in fact, is something that can be brought into every aspect of the life of every ordinary person. A person who is engaged in family life, working in an office, teaching in a school or a college, working as a doctor or a nurse, or looking after children, doing household work. Now, yoga is something which can be brought into all these. In fact, all these are opportunities for the practice of yoga, which only takes us to the genuine goal of life. The second choice is for eccentrics. Yes, that's how sometimes people on the spiritual path are, or on the path of yoga, that is how they are looked at by many in the society who live more at the level of the body and the mind, and since their choices very often don't conform to, don't match the type of choices which would be made at the level of the mind, particularly at the level of the intellect, they are looked upon as eccentrics. But then they have their own way of looking at things, and that way, in a way, the way those who are on the path of yoga, the way they look at things can be considered a higher, deeper and wider way of looking at things. And therefore, they may not be understood, but then they also don't seek to be understood. They rather seek to understand, as that famous prayer of Saint Francis of Assisi goes, Lord, let me seek more to understand than to be understood, seek more to love than to be loved. So it is their, in fact, responsibility to understand those who consider them eccentrics. It's a path for the sick. That is again another way in which yoga is looked at these days, as an easy way to good health, as a substitute for conventional medical treatment. People who somehow feel that drugs have side effects and are afraid of the surgeon's knife, they feel that a substitute for drugs and surgery perhaps is yoga, and so they want to give it a try. But then that is not what yoga was designed for. Yoga, in fact, is open to all, and anybody's life or what we are doing can be enhanced, enriched, and ennobled by yoga. So it's a yoga is a path which is open to all. So the right answer is the last one. Yoga is a path open to all. Let's have a look at the next question. The commonest challenge during meditation is unwanted stray thoughts, sitting still for a long time, choosing the right mantra, inability to reach Samadhi. The challenge of unwanted stray thoughts is something that every meditator has experienced, and even highly experienced meditators confess that it happens to them. Sitting still for a long time may be difficult, but that is not the most difficult challenge. And in fact, it is not absolutely essential also that one sits absolutely still for a very long time. And therefore, that really is not a major challenge, and it's not the commonest challenge which people talk about. Choosing the right mantra, there's nothing like a right or wrong mantra. Your mantra is your mantra. And therefore, whatever is sacred to you, whatever signifies the divine to you, is your mantra, and therefore, the limitation is not choosing the right mantra. That is not, in fact, a challenge. It need not be even a mantra. It can be a word like truth or sincerity or gratitude. One can meditate even upon these words. Then inability to reach Samadhi. While Samadhi may hold a lot of attraction, because that is the eighth limb of Ashtanga, and one may like to reach the eighth stage as quickly as possible. But at the same time, most people also reconcile to the fact that Samadhi may not come too quickly, and therefore that do not consider to be a real challenge. So, in fact, the best alternative here would be the first one. The commonest challenge during meditation is unwanted stray thoughts. Let's have a look at the next one. Making wrong choices in life leads to misery beyond redemption, prolongs the journey of the soul, makes no difference because the ego can bail us out, makes no difference because our destiny is predetermined. Making wrong choices in life, wrong here would mean choices that are not consistent with the voice of the psychic being or the voice of the deepest self, that inner voice that whispers to us the right choice at the right moment, and it does it very quickly without taking any time. Its voice may be rather dim, shy, and non-assertive, but it is extremely clear about what is right and wrong. And that is what here wrong choice would imply. Wrong choices are those which are not consistent with this inner voice. So making such a choice which is not consistent with this inner voice, which may be called a wrong choice, what are the consequences? Here are four alternatives given. The first one is it leads to misery beyond redemption. That is not true. It may give us a sense of guilt. It may lead to recurrent uneasiness, but it need not make us miserable forever. The constructive way of dealing with that sense of guilt and uneasiness is to resolve that at the next opportunity, a similar one or entirely different from the one in which I made the wrong choice, no matter what it is, I strengthen my resolve to act on that voice from within in future. So it's a strengthening of that resolve to make only the right choices in future, no matter what the risk involved, no matter what the loss involved, no matter what the conflict with the people around me involved, I'll do the right thing the next time. It is that type of a resolution that is the positive response, and that sooner or later takes away that sense of guilt and recurrent uneasiness that goes to the background, and what stays with us is this positive step that we have taken as a result of the wrong choice. So it doesn't really lead to misery beyond redemption. If that were so, all of us would be miserable the rest of our life. Making wrong choices in life prolongs the journey of the soul. Yes, that it does do, because a wrong choice means one step backwards, a step away from the goal rather than towards the goal of life. And therefore, as on the road, if we turn right instead of turning left, Suppose we had to turn left to reach our destination, and instead we turn right because on the left there was a traffic jam. We will eventually get to our destination, but the path will get longer and become more zigzag. That's what happens here also. So it does prolong the journey of the soul, because essentially we are a soul on a long journey which continues from life to life, and the destination is union with the divine. That is the final goal. But then how quickly we get there depends to quite some extent on the choices that we make in life, and therefore wrong choices do prolong the journey of the soul. Let's look at the other two alternatives also. Making wrong choices in life makes no difference because the ego can bail us out. The ego can give us reasons, because the emotional part of the being and the intellect are both linked to the ego. They are dominated by the ego, and therefore pressing the intellect into service, the ego can give us many reasons for having made the wrong choice. But in fact, that does not really bail us out, doesn't absolve us of our responsibility for having made the wrong choice. Then the last one, making wrong choices in life makes no difference because our destiny is predetermined. So whatever had to happen will in any case happen. Whatever our destiny is what we have to go through. So if the script of our life had been written in irrevocable terms in advance, that is how sometimes destiny is looked upon, then whatever choices we make really should make no difference. But that is not so. Sri Aurobindo said in the Life Divine that destiny is not something irrevocable. It's not something that is predetermined. The human aspiration and the way we live our life does determine our destiny. So in fact, we are rewriting our destiny at many stages in life, particularly when we make major choices in life. We are rewriting our destiny, because after all, what is destiny? Destiny is the type of conditions and circumstances that we keep getting in life for fulfilling the purpose of life. It is those conditions and circumstances. And the conditions and circumstances that we get are not only determined by the choices that we make. In fact, the fact that our destiny is being rewritten, the divine itself is collaborating with us when we make the right choices, is shown by the fact that our external circumstances sometimes get reorganized in mysterious ways to help us fulfill the purpose of life. So not only our destiny is not necessarily predetermined through the choices that we make, in some cases we make a very visible difference which can be quickly linked to the choices that we have made, and thereby we have rewritten our own destiny. But in some cases the external circumstances get reorganized in mysterious ways, and if we are making the right choices, if our aspiration is sincere and intense, then on the whole we find that the new circumstances that we get facilitate our walking the spiritual path. So we can't say that wrong choices make no difference, because destiny is predetermined. So the right choices, and the second one, that is making wrong choices in life, prolongs the journey of the soul. Okay. Let's see the next one. Yoga is a system of medicine. That's the assertion. The reason is the goal of yoga is good health. So let's link them. Yoga is a system of medicine because the goal of yoga is good health. Both the statements may seem on the surface quite reasonable, but yoga is not a system of medicine. It was designed for spiritual growth. The fact that it gives us better health, it helps in preventing and treating disease, is a fringe benefit. It is not what yoga is all about. It's not a system of medicine like allopathy and homeopathy and Ayurveda. Ayurveda is a system of medicine, but yoga is not. The two are closely related, but yoga is not in itself a system of medicine, so the assertion is a false statement. And the goal of yoga is good health is again not true. That's a side effect, that's a fringe benefit. Good health. So both the assertion and the reason are false statements. Now over to you. If you have any questions, you are welcome to ask.
The question in the chat box is it necessary to have a single guru in life? If yes, how to choose one when there are so many spiritual leaders and all seem to be the best?
A very good question, and I'm sure this is the question that many of us have faced. Is a guru necessary? Yes, a guru is necessary because to connect with the nameless, faceless, unmanifest divine is rather difficult. Most of us do need a form, a human form, whom we can look upon as the guru. And the guru acts as a bridge or a channel between the divine as us, and that's by building that bridge, it helps us. How to choose the guru? This can have two aspects. One is the spiritual accomplishments or the spiritual progress that the guru has already made. And the second is whether it's a genuine guru. The first part, how much advance the guru himself has made on the spiritual path, that is not of great significance. Because the guru is only a channel. The force that is being communicated to us is that of the divine. Since the force being communicated is the same in all cases, irrespective of the guru, the spiritual accomplishments or the spiritual stature of the guru really makes no difference. And not only that, the question also was whether we should have just one guru in life. To some extent, yes, that is necessary, although it's not something absolutely obligatory. But to some extent that is necessary because with the guru one develops a personal bond. And that personal bond cannot be established unless we have a sense of total commitment and dedication to that guru. That is in our own interest. It doesn't affect the guru, but it does help us. If we have just one guru, then we establish a bond. We can admire many, we can learn a lot from many spiritual masters and leaders, but the guru, as far as possible, should be one so that we can establish that bond. And if you repeat the name of the guru or see the image of the guru during meditation, as we talked while during the session on meditation, you establish that bond, and the moment you start reciting that name or seeing that image, you feel that you, to your own feeble efforts, has been added another tremendous power. And that's what makes you feel encouraged on the path. That's what makes us feel loved and having protection and guidance and security and everything that comes from that source. So all that is actually coming from the divine itself, but the guru with a human form makes it easier for us to feel that we are in touch with that higher power, and the guru is able to act as a channel for sending it to us. And the fact that one guru is better than going on changing gurus or going for spiritual shopping or guru shopping, comes out also from the Gita, where Sri Krishna at one point says that if anyone gets attracted to a dev, a god, there are many gods, although God is one, but that would apply also to the guru. If anyone gets attracted to any such holy figure, be it a god or a guru, then Sri Krishna says that I fix that person's Shraddha or faith in that particular entity, in that particular god or guru. I fix it there, and then he may not realize it, but actually it is my force that is acting through that god. So Sri Krishna says that my force will act, that the force of the divine will act through whatever the person has been attracted to, and to facilitate the process, I fix that person's faith in that one. Then the second question was that whether the guru is a genuine guru. Yes, that does make a difference. One should try to choose a genuine guru, but then there is no clear-cut test which one can apply. But some of the indicators which are objective are that the guru should not be making any effort to attract more and more disciples. The Guru should not be working for any worldly benefits, be it monetary gain or be it name, fame, prestige or power. And these are some of the indicators of a genuine Guru. And at a subtle level, which is not objective, which again can be very important, is that in the presence of that Guru, the disciple should feel completely at peace. He should feel that this is one person whom I can trust completely, to whom I can reveal everything. So when a person has that feeling and feels surrounded by a positive atmosphere, an atmosphere which sends vibrations of peace, that itself signifies that the Guru is a genuine Guru.
The next question is, how should one react to death when one embraces spiritual life?
I think it can be summed up in one sentence from the mother. We should not fear death and we should not wish for death. We should not fear death because we know that death is not as final a reality as it is considered to be. It's just an episode in a long journey of the soul. So we should not fear death. At the same time, we should not wish for death because so long as we are alive, we can keep fulfilling the purpose of life. When it comes to the spiritual purpose of life, that part of the agenda of life is never over.
Sometimes I feel that spiritual dose is becoming overdose. Why?
Probably that can happen if we intellectualize spirituality too much. Spirituality is more about having some basic idea, but then after that letting that knowledge deepen, giving time for that, and then putting it into practice. So it is the deepening of that knowledge and putting it into action that sometimes we don't allow time for, and in a hurry we go on studying more and more. That is what makes us feel that there's an overdose of spirituality. So the overdose can come from knowledge, not from the seasoning or deepening of that knowledge and its practice. Practice is a joy, and therefore that actually becomes a self-perpetuating process. The more joy you get, the more you get encouraged, and the more you get encouraged, the more you advance on the path, and it becomes more full of joy. Why it becomes more joyous as one advances is that the conflict between the emotional part of the being and the intellect and the psychic being, that conflict keeps going down. So when these voices start speaking in the same language, automatically we find that it becomes easier to make the right choices, and that multiplies the joy that comes from making the right choices. So it becomes a self-perpetuating process rather than an overdose which we feel is becoming burdensome.
Another one is around the recommendation of a book. Which is the book of Sri Aurobindo that you would advise to have some foundational understanding of integral yoga?
The most basic book which would give an understanding as well as the hints for practice is a small compilation called Elements of Yoga. Elements of Yoga, which has a few basic things which Sri Aurobindo has said, along with commentaries by the mother. It's a very slim volume. A little bigger than that is a compilation for letters on yoga, which is called the Integral Yoga of Sri Aurobindo, Methods of Teaching and Practice. The first one is just about 60-70 pages, Elements of Yoga. This Integral Yoga, Methods of Teaching and Practice is about 300 pages. But again, it is nothing compared to all the letters on yoga that are available. All the letters on yoga are now in 4 volumes, which make up about 3,000 pages. So this is just 1/10 of that. Not only it is 1/10 in volume, these letters in this compilation, Methods of Teaching and Practice, have been grouped subject-wise, and that makes it easier. Letters on similar topics have been brought together. So these would be the two books perhaps would be the simplest and most useful from the practical point of view to start with. And of course, Sri Aurobindo and the Mother are one. Among the Mother's books, the two which perhaps one can recommend to start with, one is a compilation called The Great Adventure. The Great Adventure has 366 pages, and each page has one standalone passage. Now, what it means is that if a person reads one page every day, one can complete that book in 1 year. And one page has enough for a person to keep reflecting over the whole day. Not only that, one can read that book year after year and complete it once every year, and one would always get something more from it. So that is another very useful way of, easy way, convenient way of learning almost everything that one needs to know about the practice of integral yoga. The Great Adventure. We are planning a similar compilation from Sri Aurobindo's works also. Once again, 366 pages, which you can complete at the rate of one page per day in 1 year. And the Mother willing, that should be ready by the 15th of August 2022. That compilation from Sri Aurobindo's works. A similar 366 page book. Another work of the Mother which is extremely sort of powerful is Prayers and Meditations. It has more than 300 prayers, and again you can say if you read one prayer a day, it will be over in about a year. And it teaches us how to pray, it teaches us how to be a good devotee, and teaches us how to be totally surrendered to the divine.
In regards to the same Guru question, another aspect is it may difficult to find out the true motives of the Guru. Even Sri Ramakrishna used to pray to Mother to send him some disciples, but he did out of compassion. Because it can be said that the modern Gurus are also seeking to increase their reach out of compassion and feeling of oneness.
Yes, there's a shade of a difference between Sri Ramakrishna praying to the Divine Mother to send him more disciples because he wanted to help as many as possible, and the other way could be advertising, trying to portray oneself as a better Guru than somebody else, and so on and so forth. That type of advertising and publicity is quite different from just praying to the Divine for more and more opportunities to help more and more people.
Do you give any teachers training to teach yoga to kids?
No, so far we have not made any such plans. We did conduct such a course in 2010, How to Teach Yoga to Children. But after that we haven't done it, and we have no immediate plans either. But as I said in one of the previous sessions, what one can do is, of course, apart from innovating oneself and trying to see how one can make it more interesting for children, one can have a look at a book which has been brought out in 2 volumes by the Bihar School of Yoga. They have been the pioneers in this area, and they have brought out a book now in 2 volumes on how to teach yoga to children, which talk about many of the practices, about how they can be made more interesting for children.
Another question is how to motivate children and young adults towards a spiritual life.
As in case of teaching in general, the first principle of teaching, as Sri Aurobindo said, is nothing can be taught. So we don't have to teach. We have to create the right atmosphere. We have to set the right example, and that can do more than what any amount of teaching or sermonizing can do. Values, can't be practiced in a vacuum. Essentially, it's about the practice of certain values. Making the right choices is also a type of a value. Choosing at the level of the psychic being, when one can see clearly that one is losing money or one is losing time, and still making that choice, because anybody can see that is the right choice, that is the better choice. So that type of choices and that type of a practice cannot be taught to a child by sermonizing. Best is the atmosphere in which the child lives, finds others around him practicing it, particularly the parents and teachers. And next best is to provide the right type of teaching material, as we were talking about, stories, questions, exploiting real life situations in the life of the child, and engineering a reflection whenever possible, so that the child himself comes up with that conclusion. For example, in that story about how many ice creams, we saw how the child was himself going through a turmoil after buying 2 ice creams. He gave one to that poor child, but then he himself was going through that inner turmoil. And one of the conclusions he reached was that it was good that I didn't get all these doubts about what I should do, because otherwise I might have ended up buying just 1 ice cream, and I would have felt so bad eating it all alone. So the child finds that I don't have to make the right choices just because I don't want to be kind to somebody. I don't have to make the right choices just to make a good impression on the parent or the teacher. Making the right choice, making a good choice is in my own interest, because I escape that misery, that guilt, that feeling bad which I would have suffered from if I had bought only 1 ice cream. So it is that what is most effective.
Another question is I feel that I am physically weak but able to perform mental tasks much better. This makes me less motivated to do asanas. Getting up early in the morning causes lack of sleep. How do I motivate myself for physical practice of yoga?
We're all made differently, but at the same time, so long as we have a body, we should take good care of it. And the efficiency with which yogic postures do that, other exercises don't. Some sort of physical activity is generally agreed that is good for health. And if there's anything simpler than the yogic postures, it is walking. Walking is again a good exercise. So either a half an hour or so of a walk every day, Or if you are willing to put in a little effort in learning, then some of the easier and simpler yogic practice. It's not that more complex practices or difficult practices or practicing for exactly 1 hour and not just half an hour will make too much of a difference. Even if you practice regularly for half an hour, only the simpler practices, maybe spending a little more time on relaxation between the postures and at the end of the session in Shavasana. Those are the things which one can start with. And if you start enjoying it, maybe you can take it further, a little longer duration, a little more difficult practices. You'll find that that is the best way. And while you may be not interested so much in physical activity, even Sri Aurobindo wasn't. He was not fond of sports and games when he was in school and college. And that continued to be there with him throughout his life. But yet he took very good care of his body. He did practice many of these yogic practices, asanas and pranayamas. Particularly pranayamas, is well known that he did practice even very advanced pranayamas. So taking good care of the body and the mind, and these postures and pranayamas are not only for the body, they are also for the mind. So the mind, which you feel in your case is more active, and that is what you feel like using more than the body, even that performance of the mind will improve if you do these practices. So that is how I would sort of encourage you to do as much as you enjoy. Don't take it to the point where you start finding it burdensome. To do as much as you enjoy. Do only the simpler practices. Do it for a shorter time to start with, but do it as far as possible regularly. Keep a slot in your daily routine aside for that, and then as you start enjoying it, probably the practice will increase both in duration and complexity.
The next question is, if we are the manifestation of the divine, then why our goal is to unite with the divine? Are we not already united? That is already a part of the divine itself.
That's a good question, but that is sort of what we call intellectualization. In a way, yes, we are trying to unite with ourselves, but then ourselves again looked at in a wider way. Because if on one hand we identify ourselves with our physical boundaries, our personal body and mind, and then to say that we need not unite with the divine because we're already united, that identification with the body and the mind itself means that we are not truly united. Because the divine is not confined to our physical body, that is one of the manifestations, but then there is so much of creation around us, and the divine also extends beyond all creation. See, there are 3 aspects of the divine. So the 3 aspects are, yes, I am the divine, because basically I am the soul, but then everybody else is also divine. Aham Brahmasmi, but then Tattvamasi, you are also that. And then it is not just that, everything is the divine, and not only everything, what is beyond everything is also the divine. So the beginning may be by seeing some glimpses of the divine within oneself, and therefore feeling that yes, truly I am not just the body and the mind, I am more than that. But then one can't stop there. Beyond that, one has to progress to seeing the divine in all our fellow beings, in the rest of the creation. And that is again easy to accept in principle. But to put it into practice is not so easy, because what it would mean is that I truly develop a sense of universal love, and I am ready to give whatever I have to anybody who happens to be around me, a real person or a real animal or a real plant in front of me. So whatever is in front of me, if there is something that I can give that this creature or this creation, this part of the creation needs, I should be willing to give. So that is putting that into practice. So seeing the divine in oneself, getting some glimpses of it, then getting some glimpses of the divine in everybody around us, and then giving it a practical shape. The two go together and also reinforce each other. Because when I put it to practice, that is also reinforcing my awareness that yes, this is also the divine. And then realizing that the divine is not confined to the creation, it also extends beyond that. So it is only when all that has been seen, so that ultimately you go beyond one in all in one, and to the level of all as one. So when you go to that third truth also becomes real, then it can be considered truly a union. But then that is also not the end. Doesn't mean that the cycle of life and birth necessarily has to end. Sri Aurobindo says yes, perhaps it could, but it doesn't have to. One can still keep coming back to the world again and again for the sake of our fellow beings, to inspire them, to guide them. And the joy it will bring to the person who has no necessity to come back and yet keeps coming back, the joy would be to able to see the drama of the world from a higher plane where he can enjoy it, participate in it, engage with it, and yet remain free from all misery and suffering. So that is the type of joy he can experience in this world if he comes, even if it is not necessary.
The next question
एक hand भी है ना एक?
yes, I will come to that. Being in the path of yoga and spirituality, sometimes situations arise which disturb us, mainly people around us who hurt us. How to tackle this?
When we say people around us hurt us, again, we are looking for the cause of the misery in our external circumstances. It may be difficult to practice, but then the way we can really genuinely use our spiritual outlook to overcome this misery is to get liberated from this dependence on our external circumstances for our happiness. And how we can do that in case of people who hurt us or who feel we are making us miserable? The first is to try and see in that person also a manifestation of the divine. That person may be an imperfect manifestation of the divine, but then so are we. And we may not have any good reason except our own partiality to ourselves when we say that, well, we are both imperfect, but this person's way of being imperfect is worse than my way of being imperfect. That would be only being partial to oneself. So we are not there to judge whose imperfection is better than whose imperfection, but what we have to just see is that this person is also a manifestation of the divine, and therefore fundamentally that person is no different from me. Firstly, that will take away our stress. Secondly, it will help us develop a more charitable view of this person. Thirdly, our behavior, if it gets reflected in our behavior, this person may actually start behaving much better with us. Having said that, there can be situations where we are dealing with a person whose level of consciousness is such that all this makes no difference to this person at all. This person goes on behaving the way he has always been, and in fact our good behavior may provoke him to be still more unkind and cruel. That could happen. Now, in those situations, if we have no other choice and our spiritual armor is not so well made that we can put up with everything, then at least what one can do is to create a geographical distance. For example, if a woman's husband is getting drunk and beating her every day, we can't tell her that you see the divine in this husband. There can be a situation in which we have to tell her that first thing, create a geographical distance from this person. But then having done that, after she has created that distance, she still has to, from that distance, forgive this person. Because by not forgiving this person, the person whom she hurts the most is herself. Because then what happens is that she keeps thinking of what all happened while she was living with him. And thereby she continues to be miserable even when that person is not around to make her truly miserable. So she is giving this power to make this person to make her miserable even when she is far away from him. She is not living with him. Why hand over that remote control to this person? So by forgiving yourself, you are doing the favor to yourself. That person perhaps doesn't even know whether you're forgiven or not. But forgiving that person, and this fundamental way of forgiving it, that person is also a manifestation of the divine. So going by that principle, just as an article of faith, no matter who the person is, forgive that person genuinely, and then you find that you can be at peace.
I think in the continuation for the same thing, there's just one more question. Being on this path, we see divine in oneself and everyone, and not hurt or cheat others. But if someone hurts or cheats us often, how to help them?
Yes, this often is a desire that people on the spiritual path feel, but it's very difficult to change others. One can't take the responsibility for the spiritual growth of others, not even those who are very close to us, those who are living with us, be they our colleagues in, or be they our close relatives, even if they happen to be our siblings or children or partner. For none of these we can take responsibility. The maximum one can hope for is that your influence, your presence will have a positive influence on them. By and large, we can't really do anything directly which will ensure that they also start walking the path.
Good morning, sir. It's Pradeep. Am I audible?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Sir, my question for today is like in the one question, it comes like taking a wrong choices make no difference because our destiny is predetermined. Can you put more light on this? Because till now, I think that our destiny is already fixed. We are just moving towards that. But it comes like we can redesign or reroute something like we can redetermine our that destiny. It's like confusing for me.
So, in fact, the difficulty, your question is because of one fundamental sort of difference that we had. I said clearly that our destiny is not predetermined, while the equipment with which we are born, the type of sanskars with which we are born, is pre-designed, but the entire script of our life has not been written in such a way that it cannot be altered. It can be edited, if nothing else. So that is where the difference came in. And who can edit it? The person to edit it best is we ourselves. And if we do that, perhaps the divine will then also help us. He helps. God helps those who help themselves. So we do our bit, and then the divine will come in, step in to change our conditions and circumstances in such a way that they become more favorable. Perhaps one way I could sum up the response to this question could be in terms of what another spiritual guru these days, who is around, Sri Ravi Shankarji, has said. What he has said is that the fate and free will, or destiny and free will, are both realities. Both are real to some extent. They have one goes into the complexity of it. Both have some truth behind them. But then he says that what should a wise person do, what should a fool do, or what does a fool do? The wise person looks upon the past as destiny and the future as free will and is happy in the present. The fool looks upon the past with regret, looks upon the future as destiny, and is miserable in the present. I think that beautifully sums up what our attitude should be to destiny and free will.
Thank you, sir.
Another question is it true that Yoga Nidra meditation gives us much rest as around 2 hours of sleep, or it is just a myth?
Well, firstly, I must confess that I have no experience with Yoga Nidra for 2 hours, or for that matter, to practice it exactly as it is taught. I have heard the sort of original CD on Yoga Nidra. Occasionally made my students also go through it, but I have not practiced with any regularity 2 hours of Yoga Nidra. It is, firstly, there's a certain amount of clear-cut sort of steps about it which are not very much in the spirit of integral yoga. We have a lot more flexibility. We go by basic principles rather than a rigid way of doing something. But having said that, I'm not sure if the two can be really equated. If a person on the path of yoga advances beyond a certain point, the necessity for normal sleep does go down. But whether it happens entirely because of a technique like Yoga Nidra, or it happens because of the overall spiritual progress that the person is making, would be doubtful. Why I'm saying all that with all these riders and qualifications is that this comparison between sleep and the meditative process, Yoga Nidra is a type of meditative process, was done experimentally in scientific terms by a person called Herbert Benson. And the conclusion he came to was that there's a very significant difference between the two. In case of sleep, the metabolic rate, that is the rate at which we consume energy, keeps going down throughout the night slowly over a period of 7 to 8 hours, so that by the time we are about to wake up, our energy consumption is significantly less than when we go to bed. In case of meditation, it's very different. It doesn't go down slowly. Within the first 5 minutes or so of meditation, it falls steeply, the energy consumption. And then it stays there throughout the period of meditation, and then when we come out of it, it rather promptly rises up to the waking level again. So in both cases, there is a tremendous decrease in the amount of energy we are consuming, because the oxygen consumption depends on how much energy we need, how much energy we are consuming. So the energy consumption in both cases falls in meditation as well as in sleep, but in sleep it happens slowly over a period of 7 to 8 hours. In meditation it happens within the first few minutes. So whether this has some support for what you're saying, that 2 hours of Yoga Nidra would be equivalent to 8 hours sleep or not, I'm not sure, because again, all the consequences or all the necessity for sleep is not necessarily because of the decrease in energy consumption, because there are many other things also happening during sleep. The parts of the brain which are active during the day become inactive at night, and the other way around. And those parts which become active at night, are they really contributing in some way to a generalized rejuvenation of the body? Are they contributing to consolidation of memory, consolidation of what we learnt in the daytime? All those things, some indicators are there. All those things also are happening during sleep. So it is not only about reduction in energy consumption, there's a lot more that is happening in sleep. And therefore, to say that in every way, a few hours of 2 hours of Yoga Nidra will be equal to 8 hours of sleep would be perhaps if an oversimplification, if not something entirely wrong or erroneous. But certainly it would be an oversimplification. It would gloss over many other details. Only in a question. Seems there are no more questions. So what we can do is we can go over 6 statements which are pithy, can be provocative, and can give us some room for a discussion. So we can discuss those one by one. The first statement is, we do not get everything we want, but we get everything we need for spiritual growth. In other words, we do not always ourselves know what is best for us. We may be wanting things which may not be the best for us, but the divine knows better, and we end up getting what is truly good for us. And this we may not realize immediately, sometimes we realize in retrospect. In fact, this is something which even children can come up with. They have, that spiritual wisdom beyond what we think them capable of. Once I was talking to a group of school children, and they were praying in the morning. As usual, all schools start with a prayer. It was the morning assembly to which I had gone. Then I asked them that you were praying. Do you think God will give everything that you've been asking in the prayer? And they at once said no. Then I told them that why doesn't He give? If you are praying for it, then why do you think God will not give? And they came up with some very good answers. One of them was, God doesn't want us to be greedy. Very good answer, nicely put. Or things like that. But one answer which also I got from them was that what we are asking may not be the best for us. That also you can get from school children. So, let's go to the next one. The Gita is more about which duty to choose rather than how to do our duty. It's a common misunderstanding that the main message of the Gita is that we should perform our duty properly. We should do it with full dedication. We would do it in a disinterested manner, which means without keeping in mind the personal interest we have in terms of the monetary benefit or name, fame, power, prestige, some sort of a worldly gain. We should do it without any desire for that. And the most common thing which is associated with it is that we do not have a right to the fruit of the action. We only have a right to do our duty, but we can't insist on a particular outcome because we have no right over that. It is the divine who determines what will actually happen as a result of what we are doing. But then the Gita is not so much about the way we should do our duty, because all these things that I was saying, in fact, can be knowledge which is based on common sense, based on good sense, and one doesn't require the book of the depth of the Gita to tell us all this. Moreover, all this is based on a verse which comes in the second chapter. These things do keep coming up in later sections also of the Gita, but in the second chapter itself, this famous verse, Karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana, that we have an entitlement to action but not to the fruit of the action, this comes in the second chapter. If this is the main thing that the Gita had to say, then the remaining 16 chapters are not necessary. Why they are necessary is because the Gita is more about which duty to choose when we have a conflict, the way Arjuna had a conflict. On one hand, he thought it was his duty to fight as a Kshatriya so that he could defend justice from injustice, he could defend good from evil. That was his duty as a Kshatriya. But then he thought it was also his duty not to indulge in violence, which war inevitably involved. So it is this dilemma which Sri Krishna helps him resolve in the Gita. So the Gita is more about which duty to choose out of several alternative duties which may all appear quite important in their own way. So how to choose? And the final answer, after giving a lot of guidance based on several principles, including the Shastras, which means those written codes of conduct which tell us what is right and wrong, the final answer, that is how to choose which duty to select out of several alternatives which appear important in themselves, each appears to be important, how to do that, how to make that choice, that comes in the last chapter. In fact, not only the last one, towards the end of the 18th chapter, and that is Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Charanam Vraja. Give up all dharmas and take refuge in me, says Sri Krishna. Give up all dharmas means give up all those codes of conduct, all those principles of choosing between right and wrong, which you are familiar with, which you have studied. Give up all of them, abandon all of them, forget all of them. Instead, do what? Take refuge in me. Means take refuge in Sri Krishna, take refuge in the divine. Because Sri Krishna was the divine itself in human form. So take refuge. What does that taking refuge mean? Especially for most of us who, unlike Arjuna, do not have the fortune of having Sri Krishna in front of us in flesh and blood. So what does that mean for us? what it means for us is seek the guidance of the Krishna within, that is, the divine within us or the psychic being. So do what that voice of the psychic being, the voice of the divine within you, tells you to do. So the Gita is more about which duty to choose rather than how to do our duty. The third one is, there are no rules to spiritual awakening. We arrive in this world with a purpose. Life on earth as a human being has a purpose, and that purpose is to take the journey of the soul further. The more steps we take towards the goal, the better. But then after arriving in this world, we forget all that. That's also a part of the way we are constituted. And quite often we engage in very ordinary activities for quite a long time in life, till something suddenly makes us conscious of the true purpose of life, and that gives a new turn to our life. It's called life-turning events. But then what is it that leads to that type of a spiritual awakening, that initial trigger or episode that puts us on a new path, that gives a new direction to our life? There is no fixed rule for that. It can happen in a million ways, and each person can experience it differently. It's in a different set of circumstances. It could be some crisis in life. It could be getting super saturated with worldly success. It could be having too many failures in life. Both could become real to spiritual awakening. It could be a bad relationship. It could be a breakdown in a relationship. It could be coming across a holy person, coming across an inspiring person, reading just one sentence in an inspiring book. It could be anything. There's no rule to spiritual awakening. It could be a road accident which leaves a person disfigured or with a loss of limb. There's actually no rule to spiritual awakening, and therefore one just has to be a sort of open to anything happening in life, and the person will wake up, be on that path. But perhaps it does mean that this person arrived already prepared for that type of awakening, which will depend in turn on how much progress this person had already made in previous lives. Because the type of things that lead to spiritual awakening in some people may happen to others, but they do not necessarily wake up. They do not experience the spiritual awakening. For example, take the case of any major stress in life. For some people it may become a trigger for spiritual awakening. For many others it may not. And if I were to digress a bit to make it more interesting, it's said that it's something like being in boiling water. Boiling water is a type of stress. But then boiling water does different things to different types of things respond differently to boiling water. If one boils, say, carrots in boiling water, the carrots become soft. So these are the people who get shattered by stress. The person who gets shattered is behaving like that carrot. Then there are eggs. If you put eggs in boiling water, the egg becomes hard. So some people behave like eggs. They become insensitive and callous. Now I don't care for anybody. I don't care for God. There is no God. If He had been there, this wouldn't have happened to me. They become callous, insensitive. So that is, they are behaving like eggs. But then if you add sugar to boiling water, what happens? It dissolves and the water becomes sweet. So that is the spiritual people who have that spiritual awakening. When they are exposed to the same type of stress, their ego dissolves. They no longer identify themselves with their little self. They develop a wider and a broader vision, and they sweeten their surroundings. The fourth one, it is difficult to find happiness in oneself, but it is impossible to find it elsewhere. Now, this is a common sort of a saying that happiness lies within you. So if it is within us, then why are we unhappy? Because we have not found it, which means that we should find happiness within ourselves. We have been guaranteed that that is where it resides, so let's start looking for it. Now, easier said than done. It is a difficult process, and we have tried to understand that process in the last few weeks. How we can find that happiness in primarily three things that constitute life. The type of work that we do. Work can become a joy when done with a certain attitude. By making the right choices in life, the right choices give us joy and lasting mental peace. So that is durable happiness we get from the choices that we make. Thirdly, downs of life. Fortune and misfortune, so-called fortune and misfortune. How to convert both of these into opportunities for spiritual growth, and that is what will give us joy. That will what will make us face both pleasant and unpleasant events with equal delight. So that is all finding happiness within oneself, completely independent of external circumstances, completely independent of people and things and anything else around us. So that is what finding happiness within oneself means. It's a difficult process. But then since that is where it resides, then how can we find it elsewhere? So what we have to realize is that the process may be difficult of finding happiness within oneself, but there is no other way. If we want to be happy, let's at least stop looking for it elsewhere, because we will not find it. It is impossible to find it elsewhere. In the next one, meditation by itself does not relieve stress. Again being emphasized, because as we saw while talking about meditation, meditation is useful, it's helpful, but it is neither necessary nor sufficient for relieving stress. Because to expect that meditation itself would relieve stress is expecting too much from too little. And to expect that 20 minutes of meditation will compensate for the tension and turmoil of 24 hours, asking for too much. Meditation will be helpful, will contribute to relief from stress, if along with that we also change our attitude to events and circumstances of life. If we start seeing everything that happens in life as an opportunity for spiritual growth. So if we start doing that, then meditation could reinforce that process, could help that process. Meditation gives us an opportunity to see whether we have been actually putting that knowledge into practice, and on occasions on which we did not, it gives us the time for that inner churning in a proper poise, when our surface activity of the mind is relatively quiet. We can go through that inner churning, which will help us put our knowledge into practice more easily the next time an opportunity arises. So meditation can be useful, but at the same time, to expect meditation by itself will relieve stress is asking for something that will not happen. The last one, spirituality is a liberating experience. Yes, we have seen how much spirituality liberates us from many things to which we are bound, some to which we are bound without even realizing it, and some to which we are bound, not only bound, but get attached to. And therefore, we are not really very interested also in liberating ourselves. Spirituality liberates us from all those things. Just to sort of try and think of a few of those things from which spirituality liberates us. One is our dependence on people, relationships, and things for our happiness. Liberation from events and circumstances for our happiness. But along with that, it also liberates us from many other things. Spirituality also liberates us from many other things. It liberates us from rituals and ceremonies which are associated with religions. It liberates us from many worldly and social conventions to which other people may feel bound, and to which we also may feel bound before we started walking that path. So it liberates us from many of those formalities, responsibilities, rituals, ceremonies, and so on, to which a person sometimes feels bound, or which the person may treat as some of the indicators of living a good life. In other words, many of the things which are external in nature and are associated with a so-called good life, from those also one gets liberated, because now what is going on within becomes much more important than what we are showing outside. So various symbols, particular way of dressing up, this and that, and it liberates us from everything. So spirituality in fact is a liberating experience in ways more than one and from many points of view. I think दो चार So friends, we are now very close to the end of the beginning, and with some good news, by the Mother's grace, the YouTube channel is back, as you will discover, and the daily class recordings will continue to be loaded, and that will include not only the classes that we have conducted so far in the Yes.01, but also the Yes lectures, which now we'll have regularly on Friday evenings at 5 o'clock Indian time, 5 p.m. 5 o'clock in the evening Indian time every Friday, and the first talk in that series will be on the 11th of March, not tomorrow, the next Friday, 11th of March, and that will be by Dr. Alok Pandey, who is a very popular speaker, as you all know. So he'll be speaking on the 11th of March at 5 p.m. and no matter what topic he chooses, I can assure you it will be a very educative and uplifting experience. And as I said earlier, while the courses are completely free, we would welcome donations to Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch, and on request we can provide you with the bank details so that you can send the money online. We'll start with the next module of this courses, that Yes.02, on the 7th of April, and that will go on till the 26th of May. And 7th April to 26th May. And that will be on nutrition and yoga. May look like an unusual combination, but in fact, nutrition is taught to some extent in just about every course on teaching yoga. And as probably I might have said in some of the previous sessions, a series of 4 modules is what we have in mind, which in fact is the course on teaching yoga that we used to do over a period of 20 weeks every year. And what we have done is broken down that 20-week course into 4 modules, which will keep coming one by one after some gap throughout 2022 and may go on till the beginning of 2023. For the first of those modules is just coming to an end, and that, as you saw, included an introduction to yoga and spirituality, and on the practical side it tried to equip all of you with the necessary sort of techniques and ability, competence to practice some of the basic postures and breathing practices of yoga on your own to keep yourself fit. In fact, they are more than adequate to keep you fit. Whatever contribution yogic practices, physical practices of yoga can make to keeping fit, for that this selection that we have given you is quite adequate. But this module did not equip you to teach yoga to others. In Yes.02, what we will do is, along with the theory of nutrition, which will be based both on modern scientific nutrition and on ancient wisdom, particularly that in Ayurveda, along with that on the practical side, we'll start taking you towards becoming yoga teachers. Which means what we'll do is, instead of doing all the practices on any day, on each day we'll take up a different segment of these practices. For example, in the first one we may take up warm-up, and on warm-up, next one we may take up the Surya Namaskar, in the next one we may take up only the standing postures, the next one lying down postures, and so on. And for each of these segments we'll talk about not only how these have to be done a little more in detail, but also about how to make these easier, how to make them more difficult, which are the ones which should not be done in some disease conditions, which are the diseases in which this type of practices may be particularly helpful, and how to give instructions for those practices. So those are all things which we will talk about, one segment of these practices on each day. So that will be the plan in Yes.02. We would expect a little help from you also for Yes.02, and you might have guessed what that help is. Please, if you liked Yes.01, please tell your friends and contacts who may be interested in it about Yes.02. And not having Yes.01 will not be a handicap because all the class recordings are available anyway on YouTube. So they can watch the class recordings of Yes.01 and start doing Yes.02. And so far as theory is concerned, the two courses are entirely independent. Practical part, yes, it will be helpful if they see at least a few recordings of Yes.01 and then start doing Yes.02. But not having done Yes.01 will not be a major handicap. So please spread the word, and at least we would expect that each of you reaches 5 more. Each one reach 5. And that will give us perhaps 5 times the number of participants in the next course, and will encourage us perhaps to do even better. Of course, we are not looking for numbers, and we'll do it even if there's only one participant, but at the same time, it does add to the enthusiasm, and if the teacher is enthusiastic, he ends up doing a better job. So with that, what we'll now do is show you a short 5-minute video on Yes.02, which will also be soon on the YouTube channel.
Following the overwhelming response to Yes.01, we are ready to launch the course Yes.02. Yes.02 brings together two interrelated subjects, nutrition and yoga, two major lifestyle factors closely related to health and disease. Are you confused about what to eat? Are you unsure about getting enough of protein or vitamins such as D and B12 in your diet? Do you find it difficult to decide which food supplements to take or whether to take any at all? Are you confused by the conflicts between traditional knowledge and modern scientific knowledge? You're not alone in having these dilemmas. Many are the sources that answer these questions before you have asked them. But these answers are often conflicting, so that you don't know whom to believe. Finally, you can't be sure whether the advice is motivated by profit or by personal whims and fancies. Sadly, advice is both competent and impartial is so difficult to come by. Finally, here is someone to give you the basics of nutrition and to answer all your questions. He has nothing to gain by telling you anything other than what he thinks is the truth. And he knows what he's talking about. Ramesh Bijlani has been studying nutrition in depth for about 50 years. A product of and a former professor at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi, Professor Bijlani also holds a master's degree in nutrition from MIT, Cambridge, Massachusetts in the United States. He has with him 25 years of research done at AIIMS, primarily on nutrition in relation to cardiovascular diseases and diabetes. His first book on nutrition, Eating Scientifically, was published by Orient Longman in 1974. After that, he has written several more. Hum Kya Khaye in 1989, Nutrition, a Practical Approach in 1992, and his latest and very popular Eating Wisely and Well, published by Rupa Books in 2012. Added to this, Professor Bijlani has taken keen interest in yoga and Ayurveda since 1992. In ancient Indian wisdom, he has found what he had not in his decades of contact with modern scientific nutrition. A synthesis of the ancient and the modern is what he has brought into his latest book, Eating Wisely and Well, and will bring also into his course, Yes.02. What does Professor Bijlani do now? He stays and works at Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch, where he speaks, conducts spiritual retreats, and continues to write. To benefit from the wisdom of this rare combination, register for the online course Yes.02. An added bonus are the classes on physical practices of yoga, that is asanas and pranayamas, postures and breathing practices. This module, together with the subsequent ones, would take you onwards, not only practicing the asanas and pranayamas better, but would also equip you to teach them to others. The online course begins on 7th April 2022 and will go on till 26th May 2022. One class a day, 4 days a week. Am I eligible for joining YesO2 if I did not do YesO1? Yes, you are. The contents of YesO1 and YesO2 are largely independent of each other. What happens if I miss a class? You can view the class recording on our YouTube channel. How much will YesO2 cost? Your time, that's all. Is the course really free? Yes, it is. But so are air and water. To register, please visit yesspirituality.wordpress.com. Yes is a fledgling venture with big dreams, inspired by the better world vision of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. It celebrates the 150th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo. Joining the YesO2 course makes you a part of this venture, rather an adventure.
Then, namaste to all of you once again, and gratitude to the Mother and Sri Aurobindo for bringing us to the conclusion of this session. And Aditi, who is next to me, although not seen on the screen, joins me in wishing you all the best in all your ventures in life. Hope to see you again, hopefully also physically, in the near future. And in any case, we keep meeting every Friday from next Friday for the Yes Talks. You gave us the purpose of the opportunity to fulfill the purpose of our lives. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. We end with the music. Thank you.